McCarthy Insurance Group, serving the community for over 70 years. For home, farm, motor, life, health and business insurance, log on to mig.ie or free phone 1800 50 11 11. Probably your best call in 2024. Charles McCarthy Insurance is trading as McCarthy Insurance Group, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Real people, real opinions, real talk radio. The multi-award-winning Niall Boylan Show.
Classic hits.
A lot of RTE are under serious pressure. Serious pressure. I gotta be honest, the ratings for this must be better than the Late Late Show. Because so many people I'm talking to are watching it. I talked to one guy today and I said to him, "Are you watching it?" And he says, "It's awful, but I can't turn it off." And they just can't turn it off. And I think the highlight of today, well, actually, I'll get to the highlights of today in a few minutes, right? But let's just get a bit of an update on what's going on in RTE, in case you're missing it, in case you're not watching it live every single day as the Oireachtas Committee quiz these people. It's like something from an American TV show, you know, that kind of whole barrister thing. I put it to you, sir. It's just so intriguing. But on a very serious note, the corruption, the lies, the deceit, it's just horrendous for a public body to be so deceitful. It's just horrendous to watch because it's taxpayers' money. Joanna Sweeney is the CEO of Digital Training Institute, 3-time author on government and public sector communications, and also has her own podcast, and she joins me this evening. Joanna, how are you?
Good, Niall. How are you doing?
I actually said Joanna, and I think it's Joanne, isn't it?
Yeah, plain old Joanne.
Sorry, I do apologise for sticking an A on the end of it.
Okay.
Joanne, look, this is, you know, on one hand it's popcorn television, but on the other hand it's extremely serious because if you go back to the early part of 2000, there was an audit done on RTE because they were looking for an increase in the licence fee from 107 to 140 or something at the time. And the government said it was disastrously run. You would imagine 20 years later they would have fixed that, but it's not fixed. It's still a mess.
And I just think that it all is unravelling. And over the past 2 days, there's been far more information that's been revealed. And I have to say, on the back of the excellent line of questioning from our TDs and our senators in the Media and Arts Committee, first of all, and then in the Public Accounts Committee. So they've done a real great public service, first of all. And it all started with the apparent concealment of two €75,000 payments to Ryan Tubridy to top up his salary. And obviously we know now that his reported salary was underreported, and that was
because he didn't want to say he didn't want to take a pay cut, and it was made clear during the questioning yesterday. Did any of the top 10 refuse to take a pay cut? And the deputy GD or DG said yes. Ryan Tubridy resisted the pay cut, and his agent. So we know now that's where this all came from, because it was a kind of sweet deal to make sure he didn't get annoyed, upset about it. So this doesn't reflect well on Ryan. Now, I suppose some of the big moments, and let's just play out some short clips here. Did Ryan have knowledge of the payments? Have a listen to this.
Just to give context, because I knew it would come up. So what I'd actually done was I was trying to work out the day the Director of Content told me that Ryan Tubridy had come into his office to tell him that he was stepping down. So I went back and checked my email, because I had sent him an email with a list of potential presenters. And that was on, I think it was March 13th. So in my mind, I didn't realise that actually the CFO had contact from the auditors on whatever it was, March the 10th or whatever. So just to clarify that.
Okay, so Ryan Tubridy could well have been informed by somebody that this process or these concerns had been raised.
Based on the information from yesterday, it's possible.
So now they're saying, Joanne, that Ryan Tubridy may have had knowledge that this was all going to come out, and these payments, etc., and it may not, as people have suspected, just have been a coincidence that the Late Late Show, or his position of the Late Late Show, where he resigned from his position of the Late Late Show. We don't know that for sure, of course, until Ryan Tubridy talks about it. But that seems to be what he's indicating.
Yeah, and that was where the line of questioning was going today. It's almost like we need an infographic of the timelines and the dates. And I think the Currency did a good one a couple of days ago. But as the more information came out from the witnesses at the hearings over the past 2 days, it seems that there was knowledge internally that the payment, call it what you will, scandal at this stage was going to break. And I would imagine there was a lot of conversations internally. And unfortunately, for everybody involved in this, and a big part of me feels very bad for those people who've had to sit through that and answer questions on behalf of people who are not there to answer those questions. We can only speculate. And I think the Taoiseach actually said today that Ryan Tubridy and Noel Kelly of NK Management should come before the Public Accounts Committee and speak on their own behalf and try to clear up some of the confusion. So
I'm confused about the legality of sequestering them, but I do believe, and I think the Taoiseach probably believes this too, they have a moral obligation at this point to come forward and to answer or put to bed any doubts people may have. And that could be good for his own career too, because unfortunately, and it was pointed out today as well, this is not good for Ryan Tubridy's career. And they also went into very deeply today why they asked him to step down from his radio position, why he was not, I'm not going to use the word suspended, but relieved of his position temporarily on radio, because in turn, I think, I'm trying to remember which TD it was, Independent TD, that had suggested that have you got money set by for when Ryan Tubridy sues you? And that was suggested today.
Yeah, that was
today.
Verona Murphy.
Verona Murphy,
Verona
that's right.
Murphy, yeah. And she was very vociferous in her stance on that. And she had a very extended monologue on the potential impact of Ryan being, in inverted commas, temporarily released from his radio show pending the hearings of the Public Accounts Committee and an internal investigation. And I mean, I thought that was pretty stark in my own view.
Because she pointed out whatever has been done wrong here, it wasn't illegal. Whatever about your moral views on, the greed of it or whatever it happens to be, that's irrelevant. But nothing illegal happened. And she said that's what Ryan Tubridy's lawyers will be looking at, that he didn't do anything illegal, hence he shouldn't be out of a job at this moment in time.
And reputation is everything. And you know this. You're in the media game for a long time, and reputation is everything. And I was watching it today and I wondered if Ryan is sitting at home and watching this. Yeah. And, feeling compelled to pick up the phone, and whether to his lawyers or to his agent, to say, listen, I really need to speak. And I did wonder myself, what is the advice that he is receiving? Because Ryan has a lot of public support in this country. And I genuinely feel that people just felt disappointed that he didn't speak up.
I think people are saddened by
he had
it.
An opportunity.
Yeah, I think they're saddened by the fact that maybe they thought he was a bit greedy in this whole thing, because everybody else was taking a cut and he didn't want to, or certainly his agent indicated that he didn't want to, whichever of them it is, and the fact that he would have been aware of this money and didn't draw attention to it when it was publicly produced every year as the earnings are every single year. And I think people will be, you're right, disappointed, but also saddened by this. And I've mentioned a few times on the air this week that I've met Ryan on a number of occasions. He's a really nice guy. He's a very genuine person. I got castigated on Twitter for saying I felt a bit sorry for him because he's in a very difficult situation. He's made a mistake. There's no doubt about that. But, he's done nothing illegal.
And the other thing to say is that when I saw 200 members of staff of RTE on the plinth of Montrose, I think it was on Tuesday, I think that was a bit of a watershed moment also, because they felt deeply let down, and they felt that their editorial standards, their journalistic standards, their own personal moral standards were being undermined by this furore that is now, we're entering the 8th day tomorrow. And that for me was pretty stark, because you've all of these faces that we are used to reporting the news now being interviewed by Virgin Media about their employer and about colleagues. And it was just breathtaking. And I think it's that level of also the collegiality within the organisation that is now so frayed. The morale must be at rock bottom. But I think when I listened to Emma O'Kelly, and she was so passionate, I felt that it was the straw that broke the camel's back, that lots of things were bubbling and they never had a voice.
I think this was a long time coming. I think this was just the nail in the coffin, to be honest with you. But look, what's coming out now is even a lot of it is a lot worse than even the payments to Ryan Tubridy. So we're seeing at a point where RTE had no money. We're telling people to take pay cuts. They had a slush fund and they were, sending people off to Tokyo to the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup, including staff members who we now seen a picture of enjoying themselves, over in Tokyo. So while the executives were living it up, the staffs were taking pay cuts.
And I was reflecting on this before this conversation, and I was like, how would I sum up the last 2 days? And I thought it's a tale of two cultures. On one side, you have the culture of describing talent. Now, that sits very uneasy with me. Mm-hmm. I think everyone that works in that organisation is hugely talented. Mm-hmm. And then you have like staff/presenters. Then
I have never, in all the times I've worked in Classic Hits, I've never heard the word talent used. I've heard presenters, salespeople, accountants, production, programming is normally what we're referred to as programming. I've never heard the word talent used. That's an RTE word.
Yeah, and so the tale of two cultures is the influence that talent had versus the influence and the brokering power that the rest of the staff base had. Then you have the governance, the tale of two cultures. I thought there was a serious lack of self-awareness among the board members and the executive board over the last 2 days, where they were asked direct questions, a yes or a no answer, and just the blankness on their faces. And then you have equity in pay, and then people taking pay cuts. And then, as I said, the influence. I think NK management have used huge influence. And
the fact that they could drum up an invoice to suggest it was for COVID consultancy and nobody questioned that. This massive invoice for COVID consultancy by a management company that's there to provide the inverted commas talent. It was clearly, and it was suggested today that it's fraudulent. And, and what makes it even worse is when they say that to them and they all sit there looking blankly at each other. And then they say to, the executive, the board of executives, is your position tenable? After everything we've gone through over the last 8 days, the lies, the concealment, by their own admission, they now admit there was concealment, and they still say their positions are tenable, which is just bizarre.
Well, the new CEO has apparently, according to the interim DG, said that there's going to be a shaking up or a reshuffle or whatever it will be of the executive board. But I think that needs to happen at executive board level, in order for any trust to be restored, because the common response over the past 2 days was, it wasn't me, I don't know, I had partial information. And at that level in your career, you should be asking questions and not taking an answer when professionally that in asking a follow-up question, you probably should get more information. So I think that was the concealment.
I know here, if the financial controller in Ireland's Classic Hits Radio had an invoice landed on our desk tomorrow, with COVID consultation for a massive amount of money, I know there'll be questions asked. You'd be called to the office, the CEO would be called and go, what's this? What is COVID consultation? What did they do for this amount of money? Before, it's just, where she said it was just, I just accepted it. It was just, I assumed it was okay. You don't assume things are okay when you're running a company that's spending millions in taxpayers' money. You just can't assume that. And it seems to me that everybody is blaming the people who are not there. In other words, it's easy to say, it was the general director of RTE, that was fine, D4, but she's not here at the moment anyway, so she can't answer. So we'll just say, she knew about that. Whereas we haven't spoken to her and we don't know, and it's unlikely we're going to, because obviously she said she's been treated badly and has mental health problems. And by the way, I do wish her well, and I hope she gets better from mental health problems, but she does need to come forward. There needs to be more transparency.
Well, I don't think it's going to go away. I honestly think that the airwaves and the online news websites and the newspapers have column inches and airtime with this for probably another month. But
the government are going on holiday, so it couldn't have happened at a worse time for RTE, because this is silly season for news anyway.
Yeah, and, what impact is it going to have now on the advertising revenue of RTE? What brands are going to want to be attached to this fiasco? Mm-hmm. Are they going to now lose lots of income on the back of the reputational damage that has been done and is rolling on into day 8 tomorrow?
Do you believe, as a communications expert yourself, and you're involved in digital training, etc., do you think Ryan Tubridy can come back after this? Because, as I said the other night, I was talking to Kieran Malooly the other day, and I said to him, it'll be difficult for Ryan Tubridy to walk into the RTE canteen and sit down to all those friends and people he used to work with. I'm not saying they despise him, but there's certainly a resentment. And it's going to be difficult for him to come back into that. Now, I know he's going to have to do a mea culpa anyway, but it's going to be difficult to come back into that environment, isn't it?
I think the sooner that he has a public conversation, the better for him. In my own mind, I'm wondering who will be the person that gets that first interview with them. I think it's inevitable, but the sooner that he does it, the better, and that would be my advice.
That's what you'd be advising him to do, to get it out there.
Absolutely.
Well, it would be advisable to go before the Oireachtas first before he does that interview. I would imagine would be the best form of action at this stage, particularly when the leader of the country is telling you that's a good idea. It probably is a good idea, because if he doesn't do it now after being asked by Leo Varadkar, it's not going to look good, is it?
No, it's not. And he has watched, or I'm sure the information has been relayed to him about how his colleagues have had to answer questions relating to his contract, even though in his first statement on the very first day that it emerged, he said RTE's accounting practices is nothing to do with me, which I thought was not the best PR advice.
No, I don't think he took advice on that. I think he just threw that out because he was under pressure. And I think, obviously, in hindsight, he brought out a second statement the following day apologising for his role and his responsibility in reporting that coming forward when he noticed it. And by the way, again, there's no suggestion that Ryan has done anything wrong legally from a legal point of view. But either way, he still has to come before people, and he still has to respond to, I suppose, the main question is, why did you think it was right to not take a pay cut when all of your colleagues were taking pay cuts? And in fairness, not only did you not take a pay cut, you got an increase. And the 75,000 that he would have got was probably twice the salary of some of the people that was actually working with him. Which is, I think, is very disappointing from his point of view. And going forward, RTE, of course, I have to say, they're doing a sterling job on reporting on their own crisis. It's an awful shame they wouldn't do that on other issues, by the way. Can I just point out? But my hat's off to them and congratulations. I'm sure prime time tonight will be about this as well. If Ryan and Noel Kelly and Dee Forbes come before the Oireachtas next week, the ratings for this are incredible. You couldn't. I mean, this is like a Netflix show. It's just. The amount of people I'm speaking to who are watching this all day, you just can't step away from it.
It really is. And even there are more RTE staff also coming out publicly and sharing their own experiences. Mm-hmm. And I feel that heretofore they would have been absolutely terrified to speak, beyond the houses of RTE. And when you see the likes of Anya Lawler and Paul Reynolds and Sinead Hussey speaking to Virgin Media, I just thought that never thought you'd see the day. A watershed moment.
Yeah. Well, the last time I remember anything like this was when RTE went on strike, which was back in the 90s. The journalists went on strike and there was no news for 6 weeks. And that's the last time I remember a crisis like this within RTE, or as serious as this within RTE. I mean, things have to change now. They are going to have to change. And even today, for example, we saw that Richard Collins, who is the CFO, refusing to tell them his salary. Which I should just have a quick listen to that bit, which I thought, I'm not going to say was entertaining. I thought it was deeply disturbing.
For the record, how much are you paid as Chief Finance Officer?
I think that's a private matter. I think we're going to disclose our earnings. We've been asked to disclose.
Sorry, just want to intervene here for a minute. The chair of the board said that all of those figures are going to be published. And given the fact that you're working for a public organisation, I would expect to hear that answer here today. The deputy has asked you, how much is your salary? I would expect you to answer that question.
I don't know what my exact salary is off the top of my head,
But you don't know
but I
what
can
your
give you.
exact
I can give you.
It's absolutely
Sorry,
outrageous.
I can give you an
Chief Financial Officer of RTE can't tell us what he's paid.
Chief
We're supposed to buy that.
Chief Financial Officer, Chief Financial Officer, being asked a question by the Deputy who has the floor, Deputy Brady has the floor.
Well,
What's your salary?
This is extraordinary. Now it's
can't
taken
understand why you've been arrested as well.
over a minute now to get a
Yeah.
very basic answer. I would have imagined.
We have public bodies in here every week who, senior staff, we can get the figures for their salaries without any problem. RTE is, transparency, truth, transparency,
I have no
trust.
problem being transparent
Truth,
with you.
transparent and trust.
Yeah.
It's a very basic question and I expect the answer to it for the members.
Okay, I believe my salary is around 200,000 base salary plus a car allowance of 25,000.
Gross.
But it's in and around that sort of thing.
3 minutes, Joanne, to find out how much he earned. He works for the civil service. We can find out his salary at any point if we want under the Freedom of Information, but he refused to give it. That just goes to show you, even after the 8 days, they've learnt nothing.
I honestly thought there was a real clear lack of self-awareness in those committees by the witnesses throughout the 2 days. I was pretty aghast at that also, and even not knowing his salary
Of course he knew his
was
salary.
very exasperating. I think we all know what our take-home pay is and how much tax we pay and how much we've left after we pay our bills.
And how broke we are 3 days before the end of the month. We all know those things. But mind you, his salary is pretty outrageous, as is all the salaries, it seems, of the executives in RTE, even though they are capped, I think, at 220, whatever it is that, a civil servant is capped at. But that's like, for him to refuse to answer the question, knowing that if I wanted to or you wanted to tomorrow under Freedom of Information, you can put in a request to find out exactly what his salary is. And yet he's sitting before an Oireachtas committee after 7 days, the last 2 days of concealment, lies, deceit, and he sits there blindly and just says, it's a private matter. It's not a private matter. Yeah, it just goes to
I
show
think
you
there
how
was a moment where
disconnected-
he forgot he was working for the state broadcaster.
I think so. But it just shows you the disconnection, doesn't it, between them and us?
And that's what angers the public.
Mm-hmm.
On a day-to-day, listen, people deserve what they get paid if they've earned it, they've negotiated it, But I think it's the level of then working in that public sector, civil service environment where you are working in the interest of the public and always putting the interest of the public first. That's what the journalists do in RTE. But then if that's tale of two cultures that I talk about, you have a commercial division that is so detached from their other half of their organisation, detached from society. What was happening to everyone during COVID? I don't think that just shocked me that they were negotiating increases when everybody were taking decreases, and there were 200 job losses in RTE in November 2019. So all of that was there not one person that said, wait a minute, guys, and stood up and said, is this not a bit mad? I think that is what is shocking, that nobody...
Are we going to get caught if we do this? If we continue to behave like this? If we continue to behave like it was 1995? Are we going to get caught? You'd imagine, particularly when D. Forbes was doing interview after interview before the Oireachtas at the time, looking for money from the government because RTE was in crisis state financially, doing interviews on television and podcasts and all sorts of things, saying how difficult times were. There was going to be pay cuts across the board. There'll be people asked to take voluntary redundancies. And meanwhile, upstairs, the board are planning trips away. They're sending clients off on little trips and taking tickets for rugby matches, company cars. It's just, you couldn't make it up.
And now they've gone backwards on any licence fee hike that they thought they were going to get to
that's out the door. They're never getting that now.
Yeah, no.
The amount of people online on Twitter that I've seen saying, I'm not paying my television licence anymore. And that's going to be so damaging to RTE now.
And it could be something like what we saw with the water charges.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question, I think, and this is where independent and commercial radio, I think, should have a stronger voice, is, redistributing any digital media or device fee, whatever they call it, fairly around the media sector in Ireland, which is very small. We're a small country, And there was one comment made yesterday that I'm not sure how much it was picked up, but I noted it. And I think it was the chairperson. They were talking about, were they afraid that Ryan might leave? He might get a better deal. And she says, well, I don't think we have the market for that. And also, these deals distort the market. And that is unfair on other media in the country trying to negotiate advertising with businesses. If there's credit notes and there's barter accounts. So it's that clarity and that transparency is very, very important, even for the level playing field that is the market when they have the license fee. Because we know the BBC has the license fee, but they're not allowed to take any advertising revenue.
I mean, the idea that they would think that they should be able to hold on to somebody, talent, as they call it, honestly, and pay them an endless amount of money or limitless amount of money, with different side deals to keep somebody in case one of the commercial sector or the independent sector take them. Now, remember, of course, the independent sector have a limit to what they can actually pay. There is nobody in the independent sector being paid as much as the top 5 RTE presenters. We know that. Nobody at all is being paid that. Probably half that amount is the most being paid by some of the larger independent stations like News Talk or Today FM. But aside from that, there is nobody within the independent sector and local independent radio. People are on a tenth of Ryan Tubridy's wages. And I can tell you that for a fact. Many colleagues that I know would be on a tenth of what he's being paid for doing, by the way, equally as many hours as he would be doing. So the idea that they can hold somebody by having these limitless taxpayers' pockets is just bonkers.
We are completely committed to rebuilding trust with you and with other public representatives. This is the least we can do. We also welcome the role that the PAC has now been afforded to examine expenditure by RTE, and we will work closely with the committee in this regard. As a trained accountant and a former financial controller, I am appalled as to how payments were recorded and presented in the RTE accounts. What was the motivation here? It appears to me that this was an act designed to deceive.
So, by their own admission now, they're saying it was an act designed to deceive. That's exactly what they're saying. There's no two ways about it. And then there was the whole thing about Ryan Tubridy's contract, of course.
So the old contract is over. There was a new contract offer going out for the radio stuff. I understand that. This hasn't been agreed, so now he doesn't have a contract for the period between coming off the Late Late Show and being suspended. Or not being suspended, that's the wrong phrase, I withdraw that, being taken off here.
I'll get the Director of Legal to clarify.
But he's still being...
Okay, so the point was that there was complete and utter confusion about Ryan Tubridy's contract. When it ended for the Late Late Show for TV and radio, they had to renegotiate a new contract that just had radio. But there was a confusion as to whether there was a contract in place or whether there wasn't. And when they said there wasn't, they were then questioned about, well, how have you got somebody working for you who's not even under a contract? How do they actually do it on the payroll? How has it worked out? How do they know how much to pay him if he's not under contract? And that, sorry, Joanne, I know we have you back there. That was quite surprising too. That was quite, I'm still actually confused by that, whether he is or isn't under a contract.
So the legal representative from RTE said that he is out of written contract, but there may be a verbal contract, but there were a lot of verbal agreements over the past 2 days that we heard about. And I think that is probably one of the issues where there isn't a paper trail. Microsoft Teams meetings weren't recorded. People didn't keep notes. And so a lot of the verbal agreements and conversations have also just escalated the situation that they are in now, because it really damages the believability factor that we have in them. But did Ryan not come back and say that he does have a contract and that they were incorrect? I think he said that yesterday in a statement.
Right, okay. Well, I suppose, again, this is all going to come out, hopefully, if Ryan comes forward and goes before the Oireachtas. As I said, he has no obligation to do that. And again, I do say that, I know we're all having a pop at Ryan, we're having a pop at RTE, we're having a pop at D Forbes and all these people. We are talking about human beings here. Mistakes have been made, there's no doubt about that. But I'm pretty sure it's not easy for them either. And I think we have to be fair to say that too. Some of the mistakes were genuine mistakes, oversights. Some were absolute determination to conceal money, which is also going to be found out throughout it. There was even, as I said, the word fraud was mentioned today during the Oireachtas. But I'm sure we won't go into that too much until the end of this all ends. So, Joanne, when's the next day, or what happens next now? Are we just going to have to wait now to see if Ryan, Noel Kelly and Dee Forbes come forward, or is there another session?
So they have been requested formally to come before the Public Accounts Committee. That remains to be seen. Gavin Riley from Virgin Media was reporting this evening that the government is going to be forced to take a position on whether RTE should face a legal salary cap for presenters. That's based on a motion set down by, I think, was it Ronan Mullen? So the conversation is going to continue, and I believe the fine journalists of this country won't let it go. But what I would not like to see is a long and extended tribunal-ish type of situation, because nobody needs this. Make it short, make it sharp, make the reform revolutionary, and have the public interest at the centre of it. And let's hear from the key protagonists in this whole play as soon as possible. And yeah.
Well, listen, if people wanted to, by the way, you have your own podcast as well, I believe.
The public sector marketing show. So it's marketing and comms for public sector.
Right, so maybe they should have been listening to your podcast before they brought all this information out. They might have learned something. It would have been a good idea. Maybe you could get them all on as guests, Joanne, over the coming months on how not to communicate.
I definitely will put in my request for sure.
And how not to communicate with the general public, because they certainly need lessons in communications, which I find bizarre, by the way, that the communications officer in RTE was equally as bad. But anyway, listen, Joanne, thank you very much indeed. The podcast is available, I'm assuming, on Spotify and all the usual outlets, and it's called the Public Sector Marketing Podcast. And thank you very much indeed, and I appreciate you coming on the air and talking to us, Joanne.
Thanks, Niall. Good evening.
Real people, real opinions, real talk radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.